You will smile, the mother said, low and vicious, in the corner of the Danver drawing room, or you will not eat at this table again. Alaric, Duke of Kirkwald, stood not 8 feet from her behind the half-open door of the card-room, a glass of untouched claret in his hand, and heard every word. He had come to this country ball only because his agent had begged him to look at a stretch of river meadow the Danvers wished to sell, and because a man who never went anywhere at all was said, in time, to be hiding something. He had not come to eavesdrop, but he did not move away either. "I am smiling, Mama," a young woman answered. Her voice was steady. That was the first thing he noticed, and it was an odd first thing to notice, because a voice ought to be nothing at all. But it was steady in the way a hand is steady when it has been told to hold something heavy and has decided not to drop it. Alaric shifted a half-step, and through the gap of the door he saw her, a young woman in grey silk that had been fashionable perhaps 3 seasons ago, dark hair plainly dressed, her chin level. Beside her, the mother, all feathers and heat. And across the room, framed in candlelight like a portrait somebody had paid too much for, a fair girl in white with her hand on the arm of a young man in a bottle-green coat. "Sir Julian has made his choice," the mother hissed. "It is not an insult. It is a preference. And it is your own fault, Elspeth, for being so much yourself." "I have not accused anybody," Elspeth said, then looked pleased. Alaric set down his glass. He was aware of a cold, familiar tightening under his ribs, the thing that had made men in 3 counties call him the Beast of Kirkwald and cross the road when his carriage passed. He mastered it, as he always did. He had learned very young that the world would forgive a duke almost anything except a display of feeling. He walked out into the ballroom instead, and the room went quiet in patches, the way it always did, and he let it. Sir Julian Vane. That was the name he had of the master of ceremonies, offered with an eagerness that suggested the man wanted very badly to be useful to a duke. Sir Julian Vane of Marshburn, a baronet lately come into his title and rather less than had been hoped to go with it. Engaged these 2 years to the elder Miss Danver, and since Michaelmas and the arrival of the younger Miss Danver home from her aunt's house in Bath, engaged in something else entirely. "It is quite the romance," the master of ceremonies confided. "Miss Cassandra is the beauty of the county, your grace." One cannot blame him. "Cannot one," said Alaric. The man laughed. Then he looked at Alaric's face and stopped laughing. Across the room, Sir Julian bent his head to whisper to Cassandra Danver, and Cassandra Danver laughed and looked, quite deliberately, at her sister while she did it. Alaric saw that look. It was not the look of a girl carried away by feeling. It was the look of a gambler counting a pile of coins that had lately belonged to somebody else. And Elspeth Danver, standing alone by a pillar with a glass of lemonade she was not drinking, met that look and inclined her head very slightly, as one does to a passing acquaintance in the street. Alaric had faced artillery at 19. He recognized courage when he saw it, and he had never once seen it wearing grey silk at a country ball. He should have gone home. He had a horse in the stable and 40 miles of road and a house so quiet that the servants had learned to speak in the corridors only when they thought he was in the east wing. Instead he crossed the room. "Miss Danver." She turned. Her eyes were grey-green and close to extremely tired, and they went through the flinch that every face went through when it discovered whom it was addressing, and came out the other side without cowering. That was rare. That was, in his experience, unheard of. "Your Grace. They tell me your father has River Meadow to sell." "He has," she said. "He will sell it badly, and he will tell you it is the finest land in the county, and he will be lying, and he will believe himself while he does it. The drainage is poor at the north end. I would not give him above 30 an acre." There was a silence. "You are advising me against your own family's interest," Alaric said. "I am advising you against being cheated," said Elspeth Danver. "Which is not the same thing, though in this house it is often confused." And then, as though she had heard herself, she went white, and her hand tightened on the stem of the glass. "Forgive me, I have had a trying evening." "So I observed," said Alaric. She looked at him then, quickly, and he saw that she understood exactly what he was telling her, that he had heard, that he had seen, that the humiliation she had been carrying about the room like a plate, she was not permitted to set down, had not been invisible after all. He watched the knowledge land. He watched her decide to bear it. "It is nothing," she said. My sister is to be married. There is a great deal to do. Married, Alaric repeated, to Sir Julian Vane, perfectly level. In 6 weeks at Marchburn Church, I am to be a witness. A witness, he said. An attendant. I am to carry her flowers to the altar and hand them back to her afterwards, and my mother says it will look very well and stop the talk. And will it stop the talk? No, said Elspeth, but my mother has never once let the truth interfere with a plan. Alaric found that his jaw had set. He turned his face a little so that she would not read it. Miss Danver, he said, if a man had promised himself to you before witnesses and taken your hand and let it be published in the county, and then walked away to your sister, that is not a preference. That is a debt. It is a great deal safer for everyone to call it a preference, she said. Safer for whom? She did not answer. Her eyes went past his shoulder, and he knew without turning that the mother was watching them, that a duke speaking for 3 minutes to the daughter nobody wanted had become, in an instant, the most interesting fact in the room. I must go, Elspeth said. 30 an acre, your grace. Not a shilling more. She curtsied and walked away, and her back was very straight, and he stood where he was and watched her go with an expression that made a passing dowager change direction. He did not sleep that night. He rode home under a low white moon with the reins slack and his mind moving like a mill. He knew what he was. He had been 11 when his father set fire to a tenant's barn in a rage and let the tenant hang for it. He had been 26 when he came into a title and a fortune and a reputation he had not earned and could not shed. They said he had killed a man. He had, in fact, killed several, all of them in a red coat facing him, but that was not the story the county liked. The county liked the scar that ran pale from his left brow into his hair, and it liked to be afraid, and he had let it be afraid, because being feared kept people at a distance, and distance was the only peace he had ever been offered. But he had spent 12 years being feared, and in all that time no one had told him the truth about a piece of land within 30 seconds of meeting him. No one had told him the truth about anything. In the morning he sent for his man of business. Vane, he said. Sir Julian Vane of Marchburn. Everything. Mr. Corbin, who had served Kirkwald for 19 years and had learned not to ask, wrote the name down. To what depth, your grace? To the bottom, said Alaric. It took 11 days, and Mr. Corbin came back with a leather folder and the particular flat expression of a man who has found more than he expected and is not pleased about it. Sir Julian, he said, is not a wealthy man. His father left him a house with a bad roof and 4,000 in debt to a wine merchant in Bath, a jeweller in London, and a person in Newmarket whom I would not care to describe as a gentleman. Go on. 2 years ago he contracted himself to Miss Elspeth Danver. The settlement was drawn up by an attorney in Wexham and signed by both parties and by Mr. Danver as her father. Corbin laid a paper on the desk. This is a true copy. I obtained it lawfully. The attorney was glad to be paid for something at last. Alaric read it. He read it twice. The dowry, he said. £4,000, your grace. Her mother's portion, left to her by her mother's own settlement, and not in the father's gift. It was to be paid on the marriage. Corbin paused. It was paid in October, 18 months before any marriage. Sir Julian applied to Mr. Danver, saying that he wished to make improvements to Marchburn for his bride, and Mr. Danver, who is not a careful man, released the whole of it. Alaric set the paper down very gently, which was the most alarming thing he could have done, and Corbin, who knew him, sat back a little. And where, Alaric said, is Miss Elspeth Danver's £4,000 now? Said Corbin. The wine merchant is satisfied. The jeweller is satisfied. There is a new carriage, and there is a bracelet, your grace, of emeralds, presented in December to the younger Miss Danver. The clock ticked in the corner of the library at Kirkwald Hall. Outside, rain moved across the park in a grey sheet. He took her money, Alaric said, to buy jewels for the sister he stole her over. That is the whole of it, your grace. No, said Alaric, that is not the whole of it. He is bound to her. Signed, witnessed, and the consideration paid and received. He is bound to her in law, and he is about to stand up in a church and swear before God that he is free. Corbin said nothing. Alaric rose and went to the window, and stood there a while with his hands behind his back. Say the word, your grace, Corbin said at last, and I will have him before a magistrate within the week. Breach of promise. The money alone would ruin him. And she would be the woman who dragged her sister's husband through the courts, said Alaric, and the county would pity her, and pity is a thing they never let you set down. He turned. No, he may have his church. He may have the flowers and the bells and the ring. Then what does your grace intend? Alaric looked at the rain. To be present, he said. He bought the river meadow at 30 an acre. He bought it in person, in Mr. Danver's damp little study, and he watched Mr. Danver's face go through 3 colours when the figure was named and not moved from. Your grace has been ill-advised, Mr. Danver said. The land is excellent. The drainage at the north end is poor, said Alaric. Mr. Danver's mouth opened and shut. Said Alaric, or nothing, and I shall not come again. The papers were signed. And because a duke who has bought a man's land must be asked to stay to dinner, and because a duke who has bought a man's land at half what the man hoped may be worth cultivating for other reasons, Alaric was asked to stay to dinner, and he accepted, and enjoyed watching the household discover that it did not know what to do with him. He learned a great deal at that table. He learned that Mrs. Danver said Cassandra's name 11 times in the course of the soup, and her elder daughter's not once. He learned that Cassandra Danver had a laugh she used like a fan, opening it whenever the conversation turned to anyone but herself. He learned that Sir Julian Vane could not hold a man's eyes for longer than 3 seconds, and that his cuffs were very fine and his boots were not paid for. And he learned that when the bell rang and the family rose and drifted, it was Elspeth who went to see the fires banked, Elspeth who wrote the letters her mother dictated and would not sign, Elspeth who was sent to fetch the wine because a footman had been let go in the autumn and no one had thought to mention it. He came upon her in the passage with a decanter in her hands. Miss Danver. She stopped. She did not startle. He had begun to understand that she had trained herself out of startling, the way a horse is trained out of shying, by being frightened until fear became too expensive to feel. Your grace bought the meadow. At 30. Then I have cost my father £400, she said, and I find I do not repent of it. Nor do I, said Alaric. Something moved at the edge of her mouth. It was not quite a smile. It was the ghost of one, the place where a smile would have been if she had been permitted any. They will make you stand up with her, he said. The ghost went out. Yes, you need not. I have no fortune of my own, Elspeth said, quite simply, and no place to go, and a woman who refuses to attend her sister's wedding is a woman who is disappointed, and a woman who is disappointed is a woman who was jilted, and a woman who was jilted is not asked anywhere again. So I shall stand up with her, your grace, and I shall carry her flowers, and everyone will say how well I bore it, and in a year I shall be the aunt who is useful, and that will be the whole of my life. She said it without self-pity. She said it the way a soldier reads a map. Alaric had heard men describe their own deaths with less composure. And if you had a fortune of your own, he said, I do not, but if. She looked at him for a long moment, and he did not look away, and something passed between them in that dim passage with the decanter between them like a wall, and afterwards he could not have named it, only that his heart was beating in a manner he had not asked it to. Then I should go somewhere with a great many books, said Elspeth Danver, and I should never again be told to smile. Miss Danver, Elspeth, her mother's voice from the dining room, the wine, and she went. He rode back to Kirkwald and sat up until 3 in the morning in front of a dead fire. £4,000. Her mother's portion left to her by name and taken from her by a man who could not hold another man's eyes, and hung in emeralds about her sister's neck. He had spent 12 years being feared, and it had bought him nothing but silence. He looked that night at what the fear might buy instead. The 6 weeks turned. He did not go to the Danvers again, but he did not go away either, and Kirkwald Hall, which had known no visitors in a decade, began to receive them. Mr. Wexham the attorney came, a small dry man who had drawn up the settlement and had never been paid for it, and who signed a sworn statement in Alaric's library with a hand that shook a little, and left with his fee and a look of enormous relief. The wine merchant's clerk came from Bath with a ledger and swore to the account settled in October in gold, out of a sum a gentleman had described as his intended wife's portion. The jeweller did not come, being a careful man, but he wrote and enclosed a bill of sale for 1 bracelet, emeralds set in gold, delivered in December to Sir Julian Vane, Bart. And Alaric read the bill of sale twice and put it in the folder with the rest. And a groom of Sir Julian's, dismissed in March without a character, and with 3 weeks' wages owing, came up the drive on foot and sat in the servants' hall eating cold beef, and told Mr. Corbin a great deal, most of it useless, and one thing that was not. That on the night the engagement to the younger Miss Danver was announced at Marchburn, Sir Julian had said, in the stable yard, laughing, that a man may as well be paid twice for the same trouble. Alaric heard that and went out and walked in the park for an hour in the rain, and came back wet through, and his valet, who had been with him at Salamanca and was not easily frightened, took one look at his face and said nothing whatsoever. He did not send for a magistrate. He did not write to Sir Julian. He did none of the 8 or 9 things that a man in his position might have done quietly, in an office, with a door shut, and the whole matter settled and buried, and Elspeth Danver still, at the end of it, the aunt who was useful. Because he had seen her carry that plate about the room, and he had come to believe, in a way he could not have argued in a court, that a woman who has been humiliated in public cannot be made whole in private, that the county had watched her lose, and the county must be made to watch her win. Twice in those weeks he saw her, and both times he was not meant to. Once in the churchyard at Marchburn, on a grey afternoon, when he had ridden over to look at the church, the aisle, the length of it, the door at the back and how it stood, and found her sitting on a flat tomb with a basket of white ribbon in her lap, tying favours, one after another, because her mother had ordered 200 and the milliner had been dismissed for cheapness. Her fingers were red with cold. She did not see him. He stayed in the shadow of the lich gate and watched her tie 40 white ribbons for her sister's wedding, and he thought that he had seen a good deal of the world, and very little of it had made him wish to break something with his hands. And once at the milliner's in Wexham, through the glass, when he was passing on horseback, Cassandra Danver turning before a mirror in white silk, and the mother clasping her hands, and Elspeth kneeling on the floor with pins in her mouth, taking up the hem. Cassandra said something. Alaric could not hear it through the glass, but he saw the mother laugh, and he saw F's head bow lower over the hem and stay bowed, and he saw the pins go in, 1, 2, 3, perfectly straight. He rode on, his hands were not steady on the reins. On the eve of the wedding he had the folder brought to him and went through it a final time by candlelight, the settlement sign witnessed, Wexham's affidavit, the wine merchant's ledger, the jeweller's bill of sale, Mr. Danver's own receipt, in his own hand, acknowledging £4,000 paid over to Sir Julian Vane in October, against the marriage of his daughter Elspeth. Corbin stood by the desk with his hat in his hands. Your Grace is certain. Am I certain that he is bound to her? The law is certain. He may not marry another while a contract stands, consideration paid and taken, and no release given. He knows it. Wexham told him so in February, and he laughed. That is not what I asked. Alaric looked up. Corbin had served him 19 years. Corbin had buried his father. Corbin was, he supposed, if the word meant anything at all, the nearest thing to a friend he had. Your Grace will rise in a church, Corbin said, before the whole county, and speak against a marriage. They will say what they will say. They already say enough. They will say the beast of Kirkwald came out of his den and took a woman. Let them. And if she will not have you, the candle guttered. Then she will not have me, Alaric said, and she will still have her £4,000, and her name, and the county will have watched that man be stripped in front of it, and she may go and buy her books, and I shall not trouble her again. He closed the folder. I have not asked her because I will not have her say yes out of gratitude, and if I ask her in a room she will say yes out of gratitude, because she has nothing and I have everything, and she is too clever not to see it. So I shall ask her in the one place on earth where she may say no in front of 500 people and be free of me forever, and no one will ever again call her the one nobody wanted. Corbin was quiet a moment. That is either the finest thing I have ever heard a man say, he said, or the worst advised. It is both, said Alaric. Have the horses at 7. The morning came up clear and cold. Marchburn church filled by 9:30, the county in its feathers, the pews packed, the whispering running up the aisle like water. Alaric came in last, alone, in black, and took the rearmost pew on the left, and the whispering stopped as if a hand had been laid over the church's mouth. He sat. He set the folder on the bench beside him. The bells rang, and Elspeth Danver came up the aisle in front of her sister, in a gown of pale grey that had been made over, with a bunch of white flowers in her hands that were not her own, and her chin level, and her eyes fixed on nothing at all. She passed him. She did not see him, and Alaric, Duke of Kirkwald, put his hand flat on the folder and waited. The parson was old and fond of his own voice, and he took the service slowly, and Alaric sat through every word of it with his hat on his knee, and his eyes on the back of a grey gown. Sir Julian stood at the altar rail in a coat of dove blue, and Cassandra beside him in white silk with a lace veil, and behind them, half a step back, Elspeth, holding her sister's flowers. "Dearly beloved," said the parson. Alaric had rehearsed nothing. He found, sitting there, that he did not need to. "I require and charge you both," the parson said, "as ye will answer at the dreadful day of judgment, when the secrets of all hearts shall be disclosed, that if either of you know any impediment why ye may not be lawfully joined together in matrimony, ye do now confess it." Sir Julian smiled. It was a small, easy, well-fed smile, and he did not look at his bride when he gave it. He looked at the congregation to see who was admiring him. "Therefore, if any man can show any just cause why they may not lawfully be joined together, let him now speak, or else hereafter forever hold his peace." The pause. The little comfortable pause in which nothing ever happens. Alaric stood up. The sound of it, one man rising, the creak of the pew, the scrape of a boot on stone, went through that church like a shot. 500 heads turned. He heard a woman gasp somewhere near the front, and then he heard nothing at all, because the silence that fell was the deepest he had ever stood in. "I can," said the Duke of Kirkwald. The parson's mouth was open. Sir Julian had gone the colour of tallow. Alaric came up the aisle. He was in no hurry. He had spent 12 years learning what a slow walk does to a room, and he used all of it. "Your Grace," the parson began. "Just cause," Alaric said, "and impediment. This man is bound already." "He is not." Mrs. Danver was on her feet in the front pew, scarlet. "There was an engagement, an understanding, nothing more, a girlish." "There was a contract," said Alaric. He set the folder on the altar rail and opened it, and the paper made a small dry sound in the enormous quiet. "A settlement, drawn by Mr. Wexhoney, of Wexham Town. Signed by Sir Julian Vane, signed by Elspeth Danver, witnessed by her father, who sits there and has gone very pale, and who will not, I think, deny his own hand. He did not look at Mr. Danver. He did not need to. It has never been released. There is no discharge. In law, that man is promised." "A promise is not." Sir Julian's voice cracked, and he began again. "A promise may be broken, Your Grace. Men break them. It is not, it is a matter for the heart." "It would be," said Alaric, "if you had not taken the money." The church made a sound, not a word. A sound low, running from pew to pew. £4,000, Alaric said. The portion of her mother, left to Elspeth Danver by name, payable on her marriage. "You applied for it in October, 18 months before any wedding, on the plea that you wished to improve Marchburn for your bride. You were given it. Here is the receipt in Mr. Danver's hand." He laid it down. "You did not improve Marchburn. You paid a wine merchant in Bath. Here is his ledger. You paid a jeweller in London. Here is his bill of sale. Item 1 bracelet, emerald set in gold, delivered to Sir Julian Vane, Baronet, the 14th of December." He turned his head, unhurried, and looked at Cassandra Danver. Her hand had gone, without her willing it, to her wrist. She was wearing it. Under the white lace on the arm that held her bouquet, she was wearing it, and the whole church saw her hand move, and the whole church understood, and the sound the church made then was not low any more. "Consideration paid," said Alaric, "and taken and spent, and hung upon her sister. That is not a broken promise. That is a purchase." He bought Elspeth Danver's silence with her own money, and stood up here today to swear before God that he was free. There is your just cause. There's your impediment. Sir Julian's mouth worked. Nothing came out of it. "Your Grace," the parson said faintly, I cannot proceed." "You may proceed," said Alaric. The parson stared. "I have no wish to stop this marriage. They are exactly suited, and I should be sorry to deprive either of them of the other." A laugh broke out somewhere in the back of the church and was strangled. let them have it. But it will not be paid for with her money, and it will not be built upon her ruin, and it will not be watched by her from 3 steps behind. That I will not permit. And then he turned at last to the woman in the made-over grey gown who had not moved at all. Elspeth Danver stood very still, with her sister's flowers in her hands, and looked at him. He had seen a great many faces in a great many bad moments. He had never seen anything like what was on hers then, and he could not name it, and it went through him like a blade. "Miss Danver," said the Duke of Kirkwald. His voice was not steady. He heard that, and could do nothing about it. "I am not a kind man," he said. "I am not a well-spoken one. The county has told you what I am, and most of it is false, and some of it is not, and I have never once troubled to correct any of it, because until I heard you tell me the truth about a field I did not care what anybody thought of me at all." Somebody in the front pew began to cry. He did not look to see who. "I have watched you carry this for 6 weeks. I watched you tie 200 white ribbons for this day with your hands blue from the cold. I watched you kneel on a milliner's floor and pin your sister's hem with pins in your mouth while they laughed of your head. And you never once complained, and you never once wept where they could see. And I have been to war, Miss Danver, and I have never seen courage of that kind, and I do not intend to stand in a church and watch it be thrown away." He went down on one knee on the stone. The church did not make a sound. Not one. "Your money is restored," he said. "It is done. It was done a fortnight ago, and it is yours whatever you answer me, and you may take it and go where you please and buy a house full of books, and I will never trouble you again, and no man in this county will dare say one word against you, because I shall be standing behind you, and they know exactly what I am." He looked up at her. "But I would rather you did not go. Elspeth Danver, before God and this parish and every soul who watched you humbled, will you have me? Will you be my wife?" The flowers fell. He remembered that afterwards, always, not her face first, but the white flowers dropping out of her hands and lying on the cold stone between them, and her not looking at them at all. "You are asking me here," she said. Her voice shook. "In front of them, on purpose?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because they made you small in public," said Alaric, "and I will not make you great in a private room, and because here, madam, you may say no, and every one of them will see that you had the choice." There was a silence that he thought would kill him. And then Elspeth Danver, who had not wept when they took her betrothed, nor when they took her money, nor when they put her sister's flowers into her hands, began to cry, standing up straight with her chin level, and she held out her hand to him. "Then get up," she said, "your grace, and take me out of here." He rose. He took her hand. It was very cold, and it was shaking, and it gripped his own with a strength that astonished him. They walked down the aisle of Marchburn Church together, and the whole county stood up as they passed, and not one person spoke. Behind them, at the altar, Cassandra Danver was still holding her wrist. They were married 9 weeks later at Kirkwald, in the little chapel in the park, with 11 people present and no white ribbons whatever. He had insisted on the 9 weeks, and she had been angry with him about it, which was the first time he had ever seen her angry, and he had found himself absurdly, dangerously pleased. "You're giving me time to change my mind," she said. "I am giving you time to be certain. I do not require time. I require." And she had stopped and coloured and turned away to the window, and he had stood in the middle of his own library with his heart going like a drum and had not dared to move. So she took her £4,000 and her aunt's spare room in Wexham, and for 9 weeks the Duke of Kirkwald courted a woman who had no need of him whatsoever, and found it the hardest and best labour of his life. He sent no jewels. He sent books, a crate of them badly chosen, and she wrote back a letter of 4 pages telling him exactly how badly, and he read it 11 times. He rode over on Tuesdays and Fridays and sat in a small parlour with a great deal of chintz and drank tea he did not want, and learned that she had taught herself Latin out of her father's unread library at 14, that she could not sing at all and knew it, that she had been afraid of him for perhaps the first 2 minutes of their acquaintance and never afterwards. "Never," he said. "You were listening at a door," said Elspeth, when a woman told her daughter she would not be fed if she did not smile. "And you did not look away, and you did not laugh, and afterwards you asked me about drainage so that I should not have to speak of it." She poured his tea. Whatever else you are, Alaric, you are not a beast. You are only a man who has been let alone so long he has forgotten how to be looked at. He set down his cup because his hand was unsteady. Then look at me, he said. She did. There was a clock somewhere, and a window, and a great deal of chintz, and he crossed the little room and took her face in his hands and kissed her once, and her fingers closed in the cloth of his coat as though she had been waiting a very long time to hold on to something. 9 weeks. He was never sure how he survived them. They said afterwards, in the county, that it was the strangest marriage in 3 ridings and the happiest, and both were true. He gave her the east wing for a library, and she filled it. He gave her the running of the estate school, and she doubled it. She had the mourning cloths taken off the mirrors that had hung there since his mother died, and she opened the great windows in the long gallery that had not been opened in 20 years, and Kirkwald Hall, which had been a place where servants whispered, became a place where they laughed. And he found that he could bear it, and then that he wanted it, and then that he could not remember how he had lived without it. He never once told her to smile. She smiled a great deal. Sir Julian and Lady Vane were married in the end, quietly, in another parish, and lived at Marchburn under a bad roof, and were not received anywhere at all. The emerald bracelet was sold within the year. Mrs. Danver wrote to Kirkwald 11 times and was answered, each time by Mr. Corbin, with perfect courtesy and nothing else. Once, years on, a letter from her mother that Elspeth read at the breakfast table and set down without a word. They wish to come, she said. Alaric folded his newspaper. Do you wish them to come? She was quiet a long while. Out in the park the frost was on the grass, and the rooks were going up out of the elms. No, she said. Is that very wicked? It is very sane. They will say I am proud. You are, said Alaric. It is my favourite thing about you. And she laughed. That laugh he had waited 6 weeks and 9 weeks and half a lifetime to hear. The one that had never once been permitted in her father's house, and came round the table, and stood behind his chair, and put her arms about his neck. And he caught her hand and held it against his heart the way a man holds the one thing he has ever been given that he did not have to take. You rose in a church for me, she said, against his hair, in front of all of them. I would do it again tomorrow. I know, said Elspeth, Duchess of Kirkwald. That is why I never once wished to be anywhere else. Outside the frost burned white in the low sun, and the fire was lit, and he sat holding his wife's hand and did not move for a long time, and neither did she.